And good evening to everybody, and welcome back to the Weird and the Wonderful with Strange Bones. Now, we've been checking out the different cryptids and things for different places around the world. And we've done South Africa, and now we are moving on to Mexico. And the idea, of course, is to look at what we have in the different places and see if there are things that we can say are similar, or if we can say that there are very different setups, just so that we can start to have a look at the kind of uh, situations that we have around the world. Welcome to everyone that has joined us. Hey there, Angelique. Um, so let's have a look at what we've got in Mexico. We are going to start with the cryptids that are found down there, and the first one, and possibly the most well known, of course, would be the chupacabra. Uh, Quite literally translated, the chupacabra means a goat sucker. Hey, King Alessier, welcome, welcome. Um, the chupacabra seems to come in varying shapes and sizes. It seems that there's a certain amount of difficulty in deciding exactly what it looks like. Some things seem to be more animal-like, others somewhat humanoid, but all agree that it attacks and drains especially the blood of livestock. And of course, as in the area, hey Piet, welcome, welcome. Um, as the livestock in the region is very often goats, then absolutely that's how it got its name. But by no means is the chupacabra the only cryptid to be found in Mexico. You also have the nagual, which very interestingly is the Mexican equivalent of the therianthrope. It is a person with the ability to transform into animals, um, very much connected to their version of witchcraft. There's TKG, hey, welcome, welcome. Um, so again, you see that it's a situation where it's a choice to transform. Again, it's considered to be somewhat dark, quite possibly negative in some way. Another interesting one, which actually comes from way back from Mayan mythology, are the Aluks. And these are a kind of jungle spirit that they're often not negative, but will interact with people at times, but they can be somewhat bad if you treat them wrong. What exactly they are seems to vary. You get a varied selection, of course. So it's hard to define exactly uh, what role they play. You then also have the Ahoizotl. I'm going to apologize straight off. These are words that my ability to pronounce is like. Um, Interestingly, the Ahoizotl is a dog-like cryptid. It's also noted in Aztec mythology. So, from around different centuries within Mexico, it turns up. Um, then, of course, you have one which I'm going to tell you that this name I'm not even going to try, the Tlahuelpuichi, a vampiric witch, um, which is something that actually is a contractable situation. You become this kind of witch. Usually it's just women. Hey, Sinister, welcome, welcome. Um, and then, of course, you have a whole selection of lesser cryptids um, that turn up in different sort of cultural places and things. Um, but by and large, they tend to be animal based, especially similar to the African kinds in many ways. It seems that they're usually considered dangerous and best avoided. But cryptids are by no means the only things that you will find in the regions of Mexico. They are, of course, very famous for their ghosts. And I think possibly the most famous of all, which has sort of dominated the ghostly scene um, for, hey Mashi, um, for Mexico would be La Llorona. Uh, La Llorona is basically a woman driven by despair and heartbreak, sad ghost, just a terribly sad and lost ghost. Happened. Of course, the La Llorona came up in one of the supernatural episodes, which was very, very well done, I must say, and I think certainly was given a good going over in that, um, but definitely is one that is truly found in Mexican culture and which is believed by a lot of people. There are those who say that it's a cautionary tale, um, talking of motherhood and grief and such. But what I find most interesting in Mexico, which echoes what we find in Africa, is that Mexico has never lost their appreciation for the ancestors, even with the majority change over to Christianity. Uh, the ancestors are still celebrated and seen as part of the community, and of course, the famous Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is celebrated every year, and there's a huge gathering in the cemeteries with gifts and remembrance for deceased family members. And that's something that is echoed quite strongly in many African cultures, and certainly in South Africa, where I am, talking about the importance. And what I find most interesting is I find in most Western cultures that once somebody is dead, they are mostly forgotten and move on and shouldn't ever come back. And if they do, it's considered a bad thing. Whereas, very much in Africa and in Mexico, continuation in life, which is quite an important thing, which are the spirits of Aztec women who died in childbirth that are said to still roam around. And according to Aztec mythology, the souls descend to earth on specific days and haunt in the crossroads, searching for children to take as their own, which has a lot in common, of course, with the whole mythology of La Llorona. Another famous Mexican ghost, of course, is La Planchada, and that was the ghost of a nurse that haunts the hospital Juarez in Gustavo Amadero in Mexico. And she now is said to be very, very, very vengeful. Um, what exactly happened and why it happened is something which varies according to the story that you hear on it, but it's agreed that there was some kind of an injustice, and she's said to cause death and take patients away as well. So, absolutely, there's some good ones, but there's not just specific ghosts that are very big in Mexico. Hey, Pepo, and I'm sorry I cannot read Cyrillic, so I can't read your name, but welcome, welcome. Um, we have, of course, the island of dead dolls. Now, this is a very interesting one because, first of all, the island is not a natural island, it was man made. And according to the story, the first doll found on the island was in fact the ghost of a girl who drowned in a nearby canal. But somehow people, maybe, who knows, put more and more dolls on this man made island, each one haunted by further ghosts. And now the island is truly creepily filled with these dead dolls. Uh, and it's said that you should never ever go there at night. And I think even during the day it would be a fairly creepy place to visit. Um, so, yeah, absolutely. The dead are definitely still active in Mexico. There is, of course, another place, the Palacio de Lecumberri, which was a former prison in Mexico City, in Mexico, and apparently the state of the prison when it was a prison was not great, and a great many of the prisoners died in it. And it is said that the spirits of the people that died there are still there, and if you go there, you will hear them and see them walking around and in the varying halls of this ex prison. And rumor has it, if you upset them, there's a reasonable chance that you'll become one of the inmates too. Then again, there is La Malinche's house, which is a 16th century mansion in Coyoacan in Mexico City, which is haunted by a ghost, the ghost of La Malinche, whoever that was. I'm not really certain. There's a lot of different versions of these things. And then, of course, one of the big things is that, as we see from the Day of the Dead, um, cemeteries are a very big deal. And by and large, burial has always been the major custom in the area. So there's some very, very old cemeteries in many of the places with all kinds of ghost legends. And I'm told, in fact, if you are so moved, you can go on tours to search them out in the middle of the night. So if you are keen on seeing some of the varying creatures and ghosts that are found there, you know, you can definitely go on tours of these things. But what I find very interesting is that Mexico has a number of stages in its sort of evolution, as it were, as a country, from the Mayans to the Aztecs to um, the time when the conquistadors were first there and brought their things, the Columbian times. that added a Christian element and so on and so forth. And we know even today the literature and cinema and so forth often have stories of ghosts that interact with the living. There's a couple of very good Disney cartoons that show this, of course. So they very much mixed um, different cultures together into a modern sort of version. So the Mayans, the Nahua, the Purepeca, the Aztecs, the Catholics, and all of that, all bound together into a sort of modernized mythology, which is very, very interesting. So if you start with the Aztecs, basically, when you died, you were supposed to go to one of three places, um, either to Tlalocan or Mictlan or into the sun itself, dependent on how you lived or how you died. Um, and it said that if you were a fallen warrior, or if you're a woman who died in childbirth, your soul would become a hummingbird that would follow the sun on its journey through the sky. If you drowned, uh, you would go to the first level of the upper worlds, so to Tlalocan, and then if you were not so glorious, you would go to Mictlan, the lowest level of the underworld, um, and apparently the journey to this particular realm would take 4 years, and there would be many sort of trials along the way um, that made it difficult for you to get there. Hey, the Emperor's son, you're back. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, if you fancy joining live, you are more than welcome. Um, we're doing Mexican ghosts and things today. Um, in their sort of hierarchy of ghosts, you got varying varieties, some of which just turned up, and others which absolutely you can say were far less benevolent in their ways of attending uh, to their interactions with people. Um, if you start off with the early stuff, uh, and I suppose if you can read the old languages, the Cantares Mexicanos is an important collection of lyrical poetry originally written in Nahuatl uh, around 1550 CE, about 30 years after the fall of Teotihuacan, and they're basically songs about ghosts and about the dead, and they were intended to summon the spirits of dead Aztec warriors back to Earth to help their descendants survive under the newly formed Spanish rule of the time. And if the songs worked, the ghost would descend from heaven fully armed and ready to fight. But of course, with a small and important caveat, which is what you might call a bit of a problem because it was human sacrifice. Uh, so right there, that would have been a problem. Um, give me a second here. I'm just going to see if I can get our good friend here. Uh, where are we? To the let's see. We want. Not entirely sure how to add a person in or to invite a person in. It's a little bit confusing. Um, mm, 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 mm. No, it does not want me to do that. Why does it not want me to do that? It is being very difficult because, after all, it is TikTok. Uh, let's see if we can invite. There we go. All right, we are live and inviting. Okay, fantastic. All right, moving on with this. So we have got to. Where are we? Hey there, are you with us? Yes, you are, sir.
I'm here.
Fantastic.
Adi.
Okay, so we're looking at a whole lot of the Mayan beliefs. And if you're willing to drop a human sacrifice, you can get a fully armed Aztec warrior to come and help your cause. So many of the ghosts in Mexico are quite violent and, well, at least to the enemy. So we've got some good sort of things going here. What I find most interesting, as I was saying earlier, was that there's a strong appreciation for the dead in Mexican culture. That the ancestors are definitely still around and should be still around, as we know with Dia de los Muertos and all of that, which is really similar in many ways to the African view of things, especially South Africa. I don't know. Were your thoughts on that?
I'm just listening. I learn a lot from you. Uh, Things you talk about like this. That you're talking about the Mexican. They still believe in the ancestors. You see that on Disney cartoons and so on. So
Absolutely.
uh,
Yeah.
I know I'm listening and just also repicturing where I've seen all these things that you speak of. I'm Muslim from South Africa, Cape Town.
Yes, yes, of course. You're a friend of
Mm.
old Scarpies.
Scarpies.
Do you not listen to Scarpstad Radio?
It's long lost since I listened to the radio.
Well, you must go give it a chat at some time. Ivest, hello.
Mm.
Good of you to join us as well.
Hi.
Are they?
So we're talking ghosts here, and I've got a good one for you. Um, looking at you get varying forms of ancestors which can come back and possibly assist if you're a friend, and possibly do quite awful things to you if you're an enemy. Um, so your first level are male ancestors that are richly defined as bloodletters and sacrifices, who become a kind of personal deity, which you have to send varying presents to, etc., that will look after you if you're one of theirs. But of course, if you're against whoever it belongs to, can come through the dark and do terrible attacks on you and what have you. Which I find to be very interesting. That the earliest ghosts were active in society, at least in belief, of course. Um, any thoughts on that? Would you like an ancestor to send after your enemies?
Oh, you're asking me?
Any of you guys? Any
Oh,
thoughts on that? You're not too sure you
that's
want
all
an
true.
ancestor?
It all makes sense. Everything you speak about makes sense. It's all in different religions, all on the TV. That's indoctrinated into us.
What was the name of that? I think it was a Disney production that they just did, um, where you had that young kid that went into the lands of the dead trying to learn to play guitar. It was a very good movie, very sweet. But he goes into the afterlife and meets up with this great player and learns to be able to come back and be a player. And it was all wrapped up in the Day of the Dead. Oh, I
But
forget the name.
before that, we knew that already. that the Mexicans
Oh yes,
believe like that.
oh
That
yes,
cartoon was just produced to remind.
absolutely. But it was well
You
done, I
talking
think.
shit.
Is
You don't believe in that? Nope, she didn't like it. Oh well. It's not for everybody. Ghosts and the spookiness is not for everybody. But let's
not
move on a little bit. We've got also varying other ghosts that turned up in the Mayan region and which all became butterflies. And according to the belief, the annual migration of monarch butterflies across Mexico are in fact the spirits of the dead starting their journey on through to the afterlife, which I think is quite beautiful in many ways. A way to remember what uh, is around. And then each of these ghosts, as they go to a specific cemetery where their families' graves are, in order to then go down to whatever comes after through the cemetery. And for that reason, then, when you have the Day of the Dead, the families will go to their cemetery. So they, each family will have a specific cemetery that is their cemetery where they will go in the on the Day of the Dead, lighting candles and bringing food and having literally a picnic on the actual uh, graves themselves to remember the ancestors and their importance, which I think absolutely is a fantastic thing. But as you go through the history, of course, with the arrival of the conquistadors, it was a very violent time. There was a lot of deaths on both sides, I think. So I think the locals got it worse. So there is no lack of opportunity for ghosts to arise. Um, as we know from looking at where the most haunted places have been said to be, it's always where somebody has died either tragically or violently. There are very, very few occasions where you get ghosts that are happy ghosts. It seems to be a thing that ghosts are always either sad or died violently or something like that. So not a lot of happy ghosts, it seems. And Mexico certainly has had a tribulous history, so plenty of opportunities, if that's what you might say, for ghosts to arrive. Um, Now, it's said that even in Mexico, there are a fair amount of arguments as to why the Day of the Dead celebrations have become so important and where they originated. Many consider it to be a mix of both indigenous and European tradition. Now, we know that the first form of Christianity that started in Mexico was, of course, Catholic because of the timing. And we know that originally in Catholicism, um, while it's mostly forgotten today, there was a very strong um, sort of appreciation of the dead and the importance of our ancestors and what went before, which has fallen away over time. But it did originally exist, and we know that the remnants of it in Catholicism, at least, turn up in the Feast of All Souls, which certainly go back to all of those who have gone before us. So there are traditions in Western culture for exactly this. It's just that it's fallen away for the most part in Western culture, but not everywhere, like in Mexico. So, absolutely, there are echoes still in a lot of um, European traditions. Danse Macabre and all of that, where things have left traces that no longer really are still considered important. But
Look, what you talking of the Day of the Dead and going to the graves in Islam, um, you have a kramat,
yeah.
so that's the same.
Okay, so there's absolutely an Islamic tradition that goes around that. So yes, and of course you're speaking, I'm assuming, from current practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mm.
I think that in every culture, to a certain degree, we absolutely do hold a level of
That's why that's why it seems like it makes sense.
yes.
That's why I say it makes sense.
Um,
Because I'm also taught similar things to what you speak of.
I think it's kind of something that almost has to be the case because if you're going to believe in any God at all, the point, if you think about it logically, is that it's that you will have an afterlife. And if you have an afterlife, then this life cannot be the only bit. So the idea of spirits and spirituality logically must be true. It's carried through
Why
in
is it
all
an
beliefs.
idea
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to believe in an afterlife if we don't hope
and
for
not the
something
others?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly so. And as we know in almost every religion, um, we have the idea that if you are a good person in some way, you will go on to heaven, whatever heaven might be. Great. But we also posit that if you are an evil person, you will not be allowed to because of whatever. So, absolutely, it seems logical then that you would get those spirits that are denied going on. Is that not logical? I think. I don't know. I think it would be, which means that perhaps ghosts are those who couldn't or wouldn't go on as they are supposed to. So perhaps that's why ghosts always seem to be either evil or tragic, that they couldn't go on as they ought to, or they wouldn't go on because they were bad and therefore couldn't go on to heaven.
Now, but what is a ghost?
Well, okay, this is
A
an
human,
excellent
a
question.
human soul.
Does it have to be human?
Because other than a ghost is jinn and angels or something else, you
Ah,
know.
yes, yes,
Ghost, what is a
absolutely.
ghost?
I,
Why is a
I
ghost
would,
still roaming? Is the soul just trapped still here? Or
yes,
a ghost can't be a jinn.
no, I agree with that. Any kind of celestial creature or spiritual creature, that kind of thing, like the jinn or anything like that, they never were human, so they cannot be ghosts. Okay, it's a different thing, but we can absolutely say that um, a ghost is something that was living that died and didn't go on as it should. I think that would be a fair description. So
Okay.
there are stories of certain animals, but not often, which implies that almost all animals, when they die, they just naturally go on. They don't have the same sort of emotional hang ups that people do, I suppose. But certainly humans can go on, which is why not every person becomes a ghost. But if they don't, for whatever reason, that's when you will get a ghost.
Mm,
I think that seems to be a fair description of what a ghost might
mm,
be. Now, we know in many cultures there is the idea of the ancestors, and that the ancestors can, in certain ways,
There goes.
interact back, come back and assist in some ways, or sometimes maybe send warnings that, you're not doing things the right way, get yourself back on path. So that's common in many ancestral type beliefs. When I say ancestors, I'm talking those that are considered to be important and usually good family members. I remember speaking with Nisangoma once, who told me that not everybody becomes an ancestor. If you're a bad person, you don't get to be an ancestor. You somehow get kicked out, and then you become some kind of an evil spirit that's kept away from heaven in a way. Um, so there's absolutely ideas in many cultures where not everybody gets to be a proper ancestor. Only if you're good enough you get to, which fits again. Now, just running through a couple of ghosts from South Africa again, I know I'm jumping a little bit. To give you an example, there's that one on the Greytown Road, which there was a terrible, terrible car crash. The whole family died, and their ghosts are still said to be there, trying to find their way away from the crash. So tragic, absolutely, and somehow unable to leave the crash site and therefore didn't move on. So, classic ghost. I mean, that's what you would consider a ghost to be, I think. Then you've got, who was it? It's in one of the hospitals. There was, well, there's the one in Mexico City. There's the ghost of a nurse that um, she died vengeful. So she's said to be angry, evil, and certainly will cause the death of patients in the hospital at times. Um, and there you've got somebody who is bad that won't go on. So again, classic ghost. Whereas 90% of all the good people that die seem to be allowed to move on as they should, and therefore don't stay as ghosts. Which, yeah, I think that fits to the general idea of what a ghost has to be. It's got to be somebody that dies and cannot move on. I think that's a fair description, and therefore is very different to any kind of spirit, be it jinn or otherwise. And in fact, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My Islamic lore is a little rusty, but I believe there are 4 varieties of jinn, um, with varying different domains and powers, and certainly they are individuals or beings, at least, that they never were human, and they're totally
Uh,
different. They're not a ghost.
no, definitely not human. They're not ghosts. But in Islam, in like Islamic studies or Muslim school, where you learn Islamic stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
different things. They don't teach the the strange things.
Well, I find that
The strange
interesting
things you must find out for yourself.
because now I was raised Catholic, okay, and at no point ever was I ever taught anything about anything strange, ever. And it was only when I actually joined the church, I was a monk for 9 years, um, weirdly enough. Um, and I actually worked alongside the chief exorcist for KwaZulu Natal. And the stuff I learned then, I was never, ever, ever taught um, in just about any teaching ever. It's never brought up in church. It's never. So they don't generally teach you pretty much anything. which I suppose is
Yeah,
kind of
like the
sad.
school, like school, same experience. In this Muslim school or Islamic studies, they don't teach you the strange things, but there would come nights or events where you go out like the different mosques or a different night, all nighter in prayer, and experience crazy things.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
it's a very special sort of situation where they tell you anything interesting. And I wonder about that because um, I've always sort of been a bit possibly too practical in this regard, maybe. But if it's part of your religion to believe in something, then you ought to be taught it. You know, if you tell me that demons are real and I must be scared of them because they're evil, then teach me about them. Tell me what the heck I'm supposed to be afraid of,
Yeah,
you know?
it's said the same thing, same in Islam. It tells you, look, they there, but they don't teach you any more about it.
Well, this I find to be almost counterintuitive in many ways because, to me at least, if I live in a place and there's like a bunch here, hide it and give you these vague warnings that it might be bad, you know, because let's face it, especially when you're young, that's a guaranteed way to make a youngster go, I'm going to go and poke it and see what happens. You know, be honest, as a kid, did you not do stupid things? I did because I was curious and nobody would tell me about it. So I don't know. I find it very strange how nobody wants to tell you anything about these things, but they are legitimate parts of belief. I mean, you said yourself they've never taught you anything about the jinn. You have to find it out yourself. And it is hard. I have gone online and looked for proper, you know, Islamic dogma on what they say about the jinn because I was interested. You know, I mean, I've read quite a few different holy books from different religions and what have you, and I wanted to know more. It's damned hard to find anything
Forgot,
that's
I forgot to ask you that I didn't. This is the first time I hear of that the four different kinds of jinn.
yes. That's actually very interesting because when it comes to religion, you will find that there can be quite a lot of specifics. So certainly in regards to Mexico and their beliefs, you've got a mix of the old Aztec and Mayan with the Catholic into the demonic and so forth. Um, and you'll find in Islam, you have a lot of things that um, are quite strongly categorized. So, jinns are elemental. So, for those of us that are not so familiar, maybe the most known are those who are the jinn of fire, which come from the city of brass. Um, and they are the ones that tend to turn up in many of the fairy tales that we come across from Arabic mythology and things. So, like Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves with the magic lamp, that would have been a fire jinn. But each of the four elements actually do have a entire set of jinn with specific skills, abilities, tendencies, the whole lot. And it really does get very detailed. And as an echo of in Catholicism, if you go and actually look into the different orders, you have the angelic orders, of which we still do have mention in the Bible: the seraphim, the cherubim, the archangels, the principalities, the thrones, um, the common angels. They're all ranked in different ways. And then the demonic hosts equally have ranks. I don't remember them all off the top of my head now. There's a whole ton of them. Um, but absolutely, there are a lot. And all of this sort of stories and things go in towards warning you about, you know, don't do this, don't do that, be careful of these sins or be careful of those sins. And in fact, with the jinn, um, a number of specific sins seem to offend specific kinds of jinn, and the stories about them are warnings that you shouldn't be too greedy, you shouldn't be foolish, you shouldn't be intemperate, you shouldn't screw around, you shouldn't be too violent, dependent on which one and why. So the jinns of fire are usually associated with teaching you definitely shouldn't be too greedy. And we know the whole story of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves was entirely about greed, trying to get too much treasure and therefore having problems with it. And then the wishes, you should never wish for too much. The Disney version, of course, is much nicer than the original stories. Um, but absolutely, the cautionary tales go back to beliefs where there were actual things that they warned you of, which now for some reason, just like in Catholicism, that you never get taught about demons, not a chance. But they are part of belief, and you're supposed to be worried about them and not go and mess with them, etc., etc. So it's strange how the beliefs are canonical but never taught, and you start to wonder why. Um, I know I had a friend that was part of a group of us who was Hindu, and in Hindu religion, they got no scam. They will teach about all of it, good, bad, and ugly, the whole lot, straight off. Um, so they don't like hide bits of the religion. And I remember one of the guys said to him, you have a really, really weird religion with all of these extra.
That's why they know more than what we know.
Well,
But
this is what
uh,
I'm wondering. Because
the
he turned
the
around and
Hindu know
said,
more than
yeah, they know
in
more.
regular.
And
Yeah, they do know more.
he actually turned around and said to the guy, well, if you think about it, you've got all of this as well. Why don't you know about it? And we were like, actually, you're right, but we're never taught. Maybe we
In
should be
Islam, it
taught.
says, I'm taught like you say the example with the fence. Don't go there. You taught don't do that. We taught not to go there.
Yes,
Just it's there, but don't go there. Done.
but that's exactly it. They sort of vaguely mention it's there, it's bad, don't touch it. And then,
So why did you tell me it's there?
right?
You had to just leave it silent, I wouldn't know, and we could all live, without knowing it's there. But you
Maybe
told
that
me it's
would be
there, so
better.
no. But it,
Um,
but they said it's there. Understand?
exactly.
Eh,
And
It's like they want to know, like and I know that if you tell somebody as they growing or don't go there, they're going to go there.
100%, it is the
So
standard
I
nature of a
feel like it was
teenager.
said, don't go there. So who's clever enough to go look there, man?
100%. I mean, I remember growing up, there was a house that everybody said was haunted. Must be honest, I don't know if it was or anything like that. We were quite young. But among us, it was the thing. If you wanted to be a real person, a man, I mean, we were like 8, 9 at the time. You went up and touched the front door of that house because you proved that you were strong. Um, and everyone told us, no, don't go there. It's somebody else's, and it's haunted. So don't ever go there. We all did. We went up there. That was the first thing we did. soon as we could. So telling somebody about something and then just saying, don't go there, it's an invitation. Come on. We know that. But yeah, moving on with the Mexican things, um, and onto something a little creepy. Um, we have some. I don't know if everybody else is like me. I cannot stand dolls and clowns. It's something that is just, it does not work for me. I don't like either of them. And there is a shop, in fact, in Chihuahua, in Mexico, called the Popular Store. It's a wedding boutique store. And according to legend, the mannequin in the window is actually an embalmed corpse. And they say that at night it moves and blinks and walks on its own. The store itself dates back to the 1930s, and the mannequin, known as Pascualita, uh, apparently was a real person, a bride, who was bitten by a spider or scorpion on the day before her wedding, causing her death. And the mother, who was abs- daughter, who was about to be bride, embalmed the corpse and kept it, and comes back to life. And especially interestingly, because the bride's intended husband was a taxi driver, and the taxi drivers that go through that area and past the shop say that, especially if you stop in front of the store in a taxi, you will see her move, um, possibly trying to find her husband. But in 2017, the mannequin was taken out of the store and put on display in Mexico City, um, for a time. And I don't know if it moved there, but apparently they said that it appeared at least that it was an ordinary uh, mannequin, but local taxi drivers will tell you no, it's not. So there's a modern ghost for you that is rather good. Um, Another one which I particularly do like as well, um, again similar to the La Llorona, is the La Planchada, which translates to the Ironed Lady. Um, Not entirely sure why called the Ironed Lady, but she was a nurse who fell in love with a doctor. How is not entirely sure how it sort of went down, but it's pretty much established that she turns up in hospitals, mostly in Mexico City, but not exclusively, in a 1930s nurse's uniform, which is perfectly ironed in the old way, which had many pleats and folds and edges. So that's why she's called the Ironed Lady. Ghosts. That's not clear. Different stories say different things, but a lot of places say that they have seen her. Um, she has a certain glow around her sometimes. Others say that she will transform to look like a modern ordinary nurse, but can be seen to not quite touch the floor when she walks, um, and doesn't make any noise when she walks. Usually it's at night, um, and she does one of two things. Either she goes into the room of a patient that really look, they're going down and they're probably going to die. And the next morning, they start a serious recovery and they say, no, but I was being looked after by that nurse. And when they describe the nurse, the hospital's like, yeah, but there's no nurse like that works here. But in other cases, she's known to go into rooms and then the patient just dies. So maybe she's good, maybe she's bad. Different stories, but certainly interesting. But again, fairly modern ghost. Um, Another one which is echoed with the South African ghosts, which you might like, because as we, if if you don't know and you're not from South Africa, our roads are truly awful, and we do have quite a few accidents on our roads, and sometimes they can get fairly nasty. Um, so, of course, many of our ghosts are either hitchhikers or car accident victims on the roads. Go figure. But Mexico also has their version of the vanishing hitchhiker, and which, interestingly, is also a woman. Very much an urban legend. She apparently will be somebody sitting in the back of a taxi when you get in and will chat with you as you're going. And you just assume, hey, she's another person in the taxi. But as you are about to reach your destination, she disappears. Uh, there are also cases where she's got into a taxi and asked the driver to take her to a specific address, but once you arrive at the home, um, she disappears. And if you go and ask at the home, then they will tell you no, she's dead, and that it's the anniversary of her death. She died many years ago. So apparently, she sometimes still wants to go home, which is kind of sad. But at least she is not a violent ghost, which I think is a good thing. There is no lack of violent ghosts to go round, so we, 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 we are glad for a nice one, shall we say. Um, Looking at the different ghosts that they do get, there's quite a few uh, different stories. One of which is if you are out in some of the cemeteries, um, you may be approached by a small child who asks to stay with you because they're afraid of the dark, which is terribly, terribly sad because after a certain amount of time, they simply disappear and you realize that you are looking after a little child that's actually dead. Terribly, terribly sad story. There are plenty of nun ghosts and monk ghosts around. Um, and of course, being very much your culture for the emotional, there are plenty of ghostly lovers as well in varying stories around the place. So absolutely. Um, one of the other interesting ones, which I think is particularly uh, creepy, may or may not be, in fact, not a ghost, but something more dependent, it seems. And that's El Charro Negro, which is a ghost that. Sorry, guys, it's just giving me beepy noises. A second, fix that. There we go, sorted. Um, we've got this guy who appears at least to be a tall, elegant man in impeccable black suit with a short jacket and shirt and the proper wide brimmed bolero style hat that wanders the streets at night in Mexico on the back of a jet black horse. And he's either a ghost, but certain uh, stories will tell you, no, he's not actually a ghost at all, but the devil himself. And if he catches you, he might take you on early. Um, According to some, the legend of El Charro Negro came about because of the mixing of cultures, and it's supposed to be a story that warns against greed, as many ghost stories do. Um, they warn against certain kinds of things you shouldn't do, um, particularly in Mexico, and so were a number of, shall we call them, dark gods in some of the early ethnic groups, like the Wisharika and the Huichol, which influenced a lot of the stories. So it sort of mixed ghost stories and Christian belief in the devil and sort of local cultures into what became um, the Charro Negro idea that thereafter popped up in a lot of stories. But that said, there is no lack of people who have claimed at least to have seen him. So who knows? Maybe the devil does ride a horse through Mexico at night. Um, there are more than one story around the world that says there are nights when the devil walks around, and it's best not to be out on those nights just in case. So who knows? Maybe he does. Um, how much this counts as a ghost, I'm not sure, um, but nevertheless. Some ghosts, however, are actually considered to be good, and if you meet them and you say the right things, saints in certain ways, they become like popularly believed in and therefore risen out of just a ghost type status. Um, there's one that apparently is the ghost of a saint that will be found wandering around and will greet you in perfect Castilian, which is, of course, a very elegant high Spanish. And if you ask him correctly in the right way, um, he will lead you to buried treasure. Um, but, but, and of course, as with many of these stories in Mexico, there's always a but. You have to approach him in a state of holiness, with having fasted and been in a state of sexual abstinence for quite some time, and offer him the correct gift, either cocoa or a turkey, apparently, and then you will get instructions uh, to where the treasure might be, but you're not allowed to say anything about it for 4 whole years where you got the money or anything, because if you do, you've broken the deal, as it were, and you will die almost immediately. So getting riches from the dead, appears as not a wise idea, possibly a difficult choice, if you will. So absolutely, lots and lots and lots of ghosts in the Mexican pantheon, as it were, some of which will call out to you, and if you hear them call you, they may very often call you by your name, and if you hear it, you must pray hard and move away, because you really do not want to find out what happens if you go to her. Certain of the more dangerous versions her, because if you do, you will regret it. They lead you to your death in a form of vengeance, particularly if you're a bad person. Um, Many of the stories will say that she will particularly appear to a man who has been infidelious. So if he follows her, he deserves to die because he's hoping to cheat on his wife yet again. So yeah, there's a warning out there if you're a little sinful, yeah, and you see a ghost, it may lead to something upsetting. So, mm, mm, don't know. It's a fair question, but they have good ghosts and bad ghosts, plenty of ghosts on roads, and again, which I find very interesting because quite a few of the ghosts in Cape Town are found on bridges, and it seems in Mexico as well. Very often bridges are involved in the stories, and I wonder why that is. I don't know that bridges are particularly more dangerous than any other part of the road. I don't know, are they? But yeah, ghosts and bridges, that's a big one. We definitely get a lot of bridges connected to ghosts. So if it's not in a particular house or place, um, seems that bridges are popular. I think that by and large, though, we can see a certain standardization of the kind of ghosts that you get showing out. If we, at least between South Africa and Mexico, that there will specifically be ghosts in hospitals. Yes. You will get nice ghosts. You will get ghosts that simply ignore you. They're just there. So they're not nasty, they're not nice, they're just ghosts. Um, and you will get angry, vengeful type ghosts. It seems by and large your tragic ghosts are pretty much the nice ones. They're there, it's sad. Sometimes you will see them at the place where they died. Um, where you had somebody that died angry or in sin, that's when you get the vengeful, bad, and dangerous ghosts. Um, I think it is kind of sad in a way that you cannot have happy ghosts, but that isn't entirely the case. I think it came up in one of our previous lives. I don't remember if I told you uh, all about it, but there was absolutely a couple that haunt a very, very old farmhouse in the Richmond area that I went to. It's now a restaurant, and a particularly good restaurant, I might add, with some very nice adult drinks, but we won't go there. But very, very nice place to visit. Beautiful garden, wonderful old house, and the original owners from over 100 years ago are still there haunting it. But they didn't die tragically or angrily at all. They were just absolutely massively in love, and they never felt the need to leave. And they are still there, very happy. And you can see them sometimes smiling out from the porch at all the people who are enjoying the restaurant and the food and um, the wonderful weather that you get out in Richmond. So you can have happy ghosts. It just generally seems that not so much, which is a very sad thing, I think. But yeah, I think that we ought to look at wrapping up Mexico there. I don't know if there's any place where you would like to go next. We've done South Africa and we've done Mexico. Um, what do you think? Where should we go to next for somewhere to look at the cryptids and the ghosts specific to that area. What about you, Emperor's Son? Is there anywhere you would like to know about?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm just listening.
I'd like to do somewhere completely different um, than both South Africa and Mexico. So maybe somewhere in Europe is going to be a choice that we can match against. Or actually, I'll tell you a good place which has a lot of history, and I think which you particularly would enjoy because in the past it was, in fact, an Islamic country at one point, and it was a Christian country at one point. And that,
Mm.
of course, is Portugal. Um, there's
Okay.
a lot of very, very interesting history there and very old buildings. And of course, Portugal is one of those countries that is a little bit of in an unfortunate position for the historical uh, side of things because it's sort of between two very important trade areas. And what that basically means is that everybody wanted to own it. And the locals had to put up with attack from uh, multiple sides quite often as people tried to control the land simply to be able to get through to the different trade areas. So they had a hard time of it in history. So you can find that there were a lot of battles up and down um, through Portugal. And of course, as we know, where you get battles, um, you get ghosts. So there's going to be some good ones there, I think, that we can look into. Um, and of course, the influences there. I've got to say, if you want beautiful architecture, go and Google some of the buildings around Portugal. They are absolutely second to none. And you can see the influences of the different cultures that are still there in the buildings. I mean, really incredible, uh, beautiful Gothic architecture. There's certain places where there's amazing Jewish architecture. There's places where there's some amazing Islamic architecture. And right across, it's just stunning, stunning countryside as well. So well worth a look around. But we, of course, intend to go and have a good hard look at what weird things we can find, what ghosts and cryptids and suitably terrifying creatures uh, might be locatable. So we are going to do that. I think in the next one we will look for one of the good areas in Portugal. Obviously, it's a big country um, with a lot of stuff, but we'll find some good things that we can chat about in the channel, and again see if the cryptids and the ghosts follow the same general rules that they seem to in the uh, two countries that we have examined already. So I think we're going to do another late one tomorrow because it seems to suit people better. I don't know. Does it suit people better? Is it an easier time to join? I think so. I hope so. So we will have a go at that. So till tomorrow. Um, Remember, like, subscribe, join the channel, send messages if there's somewhere you would like specifically to hear about. Um, Join my WhatsApp group, and we can take it further and have chats about all things weird and wonderful, as the channel says it is. And you have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Cheers, cheers.